Often when you're working on a PowerShell script, you'll have to wait for a specific condition to be met. It might be a VM powering on, or a file showing up in a specific directory. Let's have a look at how we can accomplish this in our scripts. I'll start by specifying my verbose preference as continue, as we'll be using verbose output to show the progress of our scripts throughout this demonstration. Now let's look at one way that we can wait for a condition to be met. So here I'm using a while loop, and this loop is going to execute as long as the test.txt file is not present in my snip directory. And for each iteration of that loop, I'll sleep for a second and display a message stating that I'm still waiting for the action to complete. If I run this loop, we can see verbose output starting to scroll down the screen. However, this could continue indefinitely, as there's no timeout on my while loop. If we make that text file show up, you'll see that our while loop exits and our script will continue. So let's look at how we can get a timeout working. To do this, we'll use a timer, and if I start a new timer now, I can then query, as it's running, how many seconds have elapsed. And when I'm ready, I can tell the timer to stop. So I can combine all this, both testing for my path and using a stopwatch, to test for a specific condition and time out my script if the condition takes too long to be met. I'll once again define a new timer, and then specify a new while loop. In this case, this while loop will continue until the total seconds elapsed on my timer has reached 10 seconds, or my test path statement is evaluating as true. Within the while loop, we'll sleep for 1 second, and we'll also find out how many seconds we've been running, rounded down to the nearest whole second, and then we'll display a verbose message saying that we're still waiting and how long we've been waiting. If I run this while loop now, we can see that this will continue until it reaches 10 seconds, and then I'm returned back to my prompt. However, if I run the while loop again, and then make that text file show up, we can see that we've returned to the prompt as soon as that file's in. So now let's wrap all of this into a function so that we can easily reuse this functionality. So we'll start with a function that we've called waitAction, and this is going to be an advanced function, so we're using the commandlet binding attribute. Next, we'll specify a number of parameters. The first two are mandatory, meaning that we must specify them in order for this function to run. The first is condition, and this is the equivalent of our test path we've been using up until now. And timeout is the number of seconds that will let the script run before we exit out of it. If we need to provide arguments, we can do that through argument list, and then retry interval is how long we'll sleep between each try, and we're going to default that to 5 seconds. So we'll wrap all of the code that we'll be running into a try block so that we can perform some error handling at the end. And once again, we'll start a new timer, assigning the object to timer. Then we'll use a similar while loop. This time we're testing against our timeout variable, and our condition on the right is using the script block and argument list that we've passed in as parameters. Then we'll start sleeping based on our retry interval. We'll once again round down the amount of seconds and display a verbose message stating that we're still waiting for the action to complete. Then we'll stop our timer and find out what caused us to exit the loop. So we'll test to see if our total seconds elapsed on the timer was greater than our timeout, and if so, we'll throw an exception stating that the action didn't complete. If, however, the total seconds elapsed was lower than our timeout, but we're out of our while loop, it means that our action did complete, and we'll display a verbose message telling us that. And finally, we'll catch any exceptions and display them to the user. I'll load this function into my session, and then we can look at how we can use it. So if I run my waitAction function with the condition of testing that path for test.exe, with a timeout of 5 and a retry interval of 1, we'll see verbose messages every second up until the 5 second mark, and then we get an error stating that the action didn't complete before the timeout period. If I run it again and bring that text file back, we can see the verbose output stating that the action completed. And here's another test. Say, for example, we're waiting for a computer to turn on. We can test connection against an offline computer with a timeout of 10 seconds and a retry interval of 2. Naturally, I don't have a computer called offline on my network, so this example is going to run for 10 seconds and then timeout. But note that the condition takes longer to run than just testing for a path, so the interval between each iteration shown in our verbose output is actually longer than my retry interval. That's because it took a second or two to test that connection to the computer. So that's how we can force our PowerShell scripts to wait for specific conditions with a timeout. Thank you for watching.